Bergamot drifted through the first-class cabin like a polite lie. It was meant to smell expensive, calming, curated. It could not mask the damp July heat that clung to skin and silk alike. Outside the oval windows, the runway shimmered. Inside, the air felt stalled, waiting. Victoria Street James stepped off the jet bridge as if she were stepping onto a stage. Her Dior sunglasses stayed on, though she was far from the sun. They were not for light. Her platinum bob was cut with surgical precision. Her vintage Chanel jacket rested perfectly on her shoulders. A crocodile Birkin hung from her forearm like an heirloom weapon. At 52, Victoria wore wealth the way other women wore perfume. Thick, noticeable, defensive. She did not acknowledge the flight attendant's greeting. She turned left. First class on Flight 402 was configured like a private club. 8 suites, sliding doors, wide seats that folded into beds, screens large enough to feel theatrical. Soft jazz threaded through hidden speakers. Glassware chimed faintly as a tray shifted in the galley. This was where she belonged. Victoria walked down the aisle, heel striking carpet with crisp authority. Her seat was 1K. She knew that. She had memorized it the moment her assistant sent the confirmation. $12,000. Direct to London Heathrow. No compromises. Then she stopped. Across the aisle, in seat 1A, a man sat with the kind of stillness that irritated her immediately. He was black. Late 40s, perhaps early 50s. Charcoal gray hoodie. Dark denim. White sneakers that looked clean but unremarkable. Noise-canceling headphones rested around his neck. A paperback book lay open in his hands. The spine cracked from use. He looked comfortable, grounded, entirely unbothered. In Victoria's world, nothing about him added up. Her mind performed the calculation without hesitation. Hoodie, jeans, sneakers, black. Not first-class international. Not $12,000. Not across from her. She placed her Birkin down in her suite with a heavy thud, loud enough to demand attention. The man in 1A turned a page. Victoria remained standing. She cleared her throat. He did not look up. She cleared it again, sharper this time. The sound cutting through the jazz like a blade. The man blinked, marked his page with a finger, and lifted his eyes. They were calm, dark, intelligent. "Yes, ma'am," he said, voice deep and even. "Can I help you with something?" Victoria did not hear courtesy. She heard insolence. "You are in the wrong seat," she said flatly, pointing behind her toward the curtain that separated first class from the rest of the plane. "Economy is that way." He glanced down at his boarding pass on the side table, then back at her. A small, almost puzzled smile touched his mouth. "I believe I'm in the correct seat. 1A. Don't play games with me," she snapped, leaning closer. Her perfume, heavy and floral, pushed into his space. "You saw an empty seat and thought you could sneak in before the real passenger arrived. Well, I am here now." The man closed his book gently, as if careful not to injure it. "Ma'am," he said, steady as stone, "I have a ticket for this seat." "Let me see it." "I don't think I need to show you my ticket," he replied, not raising his voice. "I've already shown it to the gate agent and the crew." A couple entering behind Victoria slowed. A tech executive in seat 2A paused mid-step. A fashion model sliding into 2K glanced over. Phone already half raised out of instinct. Victoria felt the attention and mistook it for support. "Clearly you used points," she continued. Louder now. "Or you're flying on some employee pass. And let me tell you something. Buddy pass riders are the first to be removed when paying customers have a problem." She placed a manicured hand on the edge of his suite door. "And I have a problem." The man exhaled slowly. "I suggest you sit down," he said. "The crew is boarding. Do not tell me what to do." Her voice cracked through the cabin, shrill and sharp. "Do you know who I am? I am Victoria Street James. My husband built half the skyline in Chicago. I will not sit across from a hoodlum in a sweatshirt who thinks he belongs here." The word landed heavy. A flight attendant hurried forward from the galley. Sarah. Her smile was tight now, stretched thin by experience. "Miss Street James," she said carefully. "Is there an issue?" "Yes," Victoria answered, pointing at 1A. "This man is aggressive. He is in the wrong seat. I want him removed." Sarah's eyes flicked to the man. For a fraction of a second, something passed across her face. Recognition. Or perhaps something closer to alarm. "Miss Street James," she lowered her voice. "This passenger is listed on the manifest. He is seated correctly." "Check again," Victoria snapped. "Look at him. Does he look like he paid $12,000? The cabin fell silent. Even the jazz seemed to shrink. The man in 1A did not stand. He did not shout. He simply reached for his glass of water and took a measured sip. "Sarah," he said gently, reading her name tag. "Could I have a sparkling water with lime when you have a moment?" Victoria gasped at the audacity. "Get your supervisor," she demanded. "Get the captain. I want him off this plane before we push back." Outside, somewhere along the jet bridge, heavy boots began to echo against the metal floor. Victoria straightened her jacket and lifted her chin. She believed the sound was coming for him. The echo of boots on the jet bridge grew louder, rhythmic and deliberate, vibrating faintly through the cabin floor. The sound settled into the bones of the aircraft, a low percussion under the stale, perfumed air. Victoria folded her arms. Across from her, the man in 1A adjusted the cuffs of his hoodie with unhurried precision. His movements were economical, controlled. The paperback rested closed on his tray table now, thumb marking a page he intended to return to. Victoria did not know that the man sitting across from her was Admiral David Sterling. She did not know he had commanded fleets, advised presidents, or that a single call from him could redirect more than aircraft. She saw fabric. She saw skin. She saw what she wanted to see. The lead flight attendant arrived from the forward galley with crisp steps and a posture carved from granite. Eleanor, British, composed, eyes sharp as cut glass. "What seems to be the issue?" she asked, voice cool but carrying. Victoria pivoted toward her like a prosecutor before a jury. "The issue," she said, "is that this airline has lost all standards. This man is in the wrong seat. He is aggressive. He refused to show his ticket. I do not feel safe." The word safe rang hollow in the cabin. Eleanor's gaze moved to 1A. He met her eyes calmly. "Ma'am," Eleanor said to Victoria, "this passenger is correctly seated. His boarding pass has been verified." "Verified by whom?" Victoria shot back. "By someone too afraid to question him? Look at him." There it was again. Look at him. Eleanor did not look at the hoodie. She did not look at the sneakers. She looked at his face. "Sir," she asked, "have you made any threats toward this passenger?" "No," he replied evenly. "I suggested she allow the crew to do their jobs." Victoria let out a sharp laugh. "He told me I was digging a hole I couldn't climb out of." That sounds like a threat. He did not correct her. He did not escalate. He simply folded his hands together. Eleanor inhaled slowly. "Miss Street James," she said, "unless there is a specific act of violence or refusal to comply, I cannot remove a ticketed passenger." Victoria's fingers tightened around the handle of her Birkin. "Then I will escalate this myself." She pulled out her phone. The gold case caught the cabin light. Her reflection warped across its surface, distorted by anger. "I know the TSA district director personally," she announced loudly enough for seats 2A and 2K to hear. "And I have the CEO of this airline on speed dial." The tech executive in 2A shifted uncomfortably. The fashion model in 2K angled her phone slightly higher. The tiny red recording dot blinked to life. Eleanor's jaw tightened. "Miss Street James," she said quietly, "I strongly advise you to reconsider." But Victoria was already dialing. "Yes," she snapped into the receiver. "This is Victoria Street James. I am on Flight 402 at Gate 42. There is a security breach in first class." The word breach floated in the cabin like a toxin. Across the aisle, the man in 1A watched her without visible emotion. The overhead light caught a thin silver ring on his hand. Not flashy, worn, smooth. He reached for the side pocket of his backpack and removed a slim leather wallet. It remained closed on his palm. Victoria continued. "Yes, a suspicious male, aggressive, refusing crew instructions. I believe he could be armed." A sharp intake of breath came from somewhere behind her. Eleanor stepped closer. "Miss Street James, you are making a very serious accusation." "I know exactly what I am doing," Victoria replied. The man in 1A finally shifted forward slightly in his seat. "Eleanor," he said quietly, his voice losing none of its calm, "you may want to inform the captain that Eagle One has a situation in the cabin." The name landed softly, but it changed the air. Eleanor froze. Her eyes widened almost imperceptibly. For a fraction of a second, the rigid professionalism slipped, replaced by recognition. "Yes, sir," she answered, barely above a whisper. Victoria did not notice the shift. She was still speaking into her phone, describing a danger that existed only in her imagination. The man in 1A set the closed leather wallet on his tray table. His fingers rested on it lightly, as if on a paperweight. The boots on the jet bridge stopped outside the aircraft door. A heavy knock sounded against the frame. Once, twice. The cabin lights seemed brighter suddenly, harsher. Victoria ended her call and crossed her arms, satisfaction settling over her like a tailored coat. "They're coming," she announced. "Port Authority." She glanced at 1A with triumph. "You should have taken the hint." He leaned back in his seat and looked at her with something almost like pity. "Ma'am," he said softly, "I gave you one." The aircraft door opened with a hydraulic sigh. 3 Port Authority officers stepped inside. Tactical vests, measured expressions. The faint scent of outside air trailed in with them, cooler and less perfumed than the cabin. "Who called it in?" the lead officer asked. Victoria lifted her hand immediately. "I did." Her voice rang with certainty. The officer scanned the cabin. His eyes settled on the man in 1A. "Sir," he began carefully, "we've received a report. I'm going to need to see some identification." The man in 1A picked up the leather wallet. He did not rush. He did not hesitate. The cabin held its breath. The cabin seemed to narrow as every eye fixed on the slim leather wallet in his hand. Victoria stepped back half a pace, though she would later insist she had not. Her heel pressed against the edge of her sweet carpet. The air felt thinner now, the bergamot scent sharp enough to sting. "Careful," she warned the officers, her voice climbing. None of them flinched. The man in 1A opened the wallet slowly. No sudden movement. No drama. From inside, he removed not a driver's license, but a dark leather credential case. The metal insignia embedded in it caught the overhead light. The lead officer extended his hand. "May I?" "Of course," the man replied. The officer took the credential and flipped it open. Silence. His expression shifted in stages. Mild irritation. Focus. Then something tighter. His spine straightened almost involuntarily. The second officer leaned in to read. The third's jaw locked. Victoria strained to see. "Well?" she demanded. "Run his name." "I told you." The lead officer closed the credential carefully and handed it back with two hands. "My apologies, sir," he said, voice now measured and respectful. "We were not informed you were on board." Victoria blinked. "Informed?" she echoed. "What do you mean informed? Is he a felon?" The officer did not look at her. "Is this passenger bothering you, sir?" he asked the man in 1A. The shift was unmistakable. The question no longer centered on Victoria's fear. It centered on his comfort. Across the aisle, the man rested the credential back into his wallet. "No," he said calmly. "She is upset. That is all." Victoria's face flushed hot. "Excuse me?" she snapped. "I am the one who called you. He threatened me." "Ma'am," the officer said, turning to her at last. "Did he physically threaten you?" "He implied it." "Did he raise his voice?" "He didn't need to." The officer's gaze hardened. "Ma'am, making a false police report is a criminal offense." The words struck harder than she expected. "False?" she barked. "You haven't even told me who he is." Before the officer could answer, a mechanical buzz cut through the tension. The cockpit door unlocked. The sound was distinct, final. Captain Tom Reynolds stepped into the cabin with the contained fury of a man whose aircraft had been delayed. 4 stripes lined his shoulders. His silver hair was cropped close. His eyes did not search the cabin. They went directly to 1A. "What is happening?" he demanded, though his tone suggested he already knew. Victoria seized the moment. "Captain," she said sharply, "thank God. This man is a security threat. I demanded his removal, and your crew refused. I will not fly in danger." Reynolds did not look at her. He walked past her, stopped in front of 1A, and without hesitation, without flourish, he snapped his heels together and delivered a crisp salute. "Admiral," he said, voice firm and clear, "welcome aboard, sir." The word detonated in the cabin. Admiral. It hung in the air like something metallic and heavy. Victoria felt the ground tilt beneath her. "This is absurd," she laughed, brittle and too loud. "An admiral? In a hoodie?" Reynolds lowered his salute slowly, but did not relax his posture. "The man you have been harassing," he said evenly, "is Admiral David Sterling. Until 3 months ago, Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, currently Senior Civilian Advisor to the Department of Defense." The tech executive in 2A inhaled sharply. The faint click of a phone camera shutter sounded from 2K. Victoria shook her head, as if clearing water from her ears. "No," she insisted. "No, that's not possible. Admirals wear uniforms." Admiral Sterling remained seated. "I own comfortable clothes," he said quietly. The captain's gaze returned to Victoria, and this time it was ice. "You have delayed this aircraft. You have falsely accused a passenger. You have involved law enforcement without cause." "I was protecting myself," she snapped. "From what?" Reynolds asked. She faltered. "From uncertainty." The word sounded weak even to her. Reynolds exhaled once. "You have a choice," he said. "You may return to your seat, remain silent, and we will depart. Or you may disembark and find alternate transportation." The Port Authority officers shifted slightly, hands resting near their belts, but not yet touching them. Victoria scanned the faces around her. No one looked sympathetic. The cabin lights seemed brighter now, exposing every twitch of her expression. "You cannot remove me," she said, voice cracking. "I paid for this seat, and I command this aircraft," Reynolds replied. "On board, I am responsible for order and safety." The statement was not loud. It did not need to be. Victoria's chest rose and fell rapidly. For a long moment, it seemed she might choose defiance. Then she reached down, snatched up her Birkin, and turned sharply into her suite. "Fine," she spat. "But this is not over." The sliding door shut with a sharp mechanical click. Across the aisle, Admiral Sterling reopened his paperback as if nothing had occurred. The officers stepped back toward the exit. "Thank you for your service, Admiral," the lead officer said quietly before leaving. Sterling inclined his head once. The cockpit door sealed again with a firm lock. Moments later, the engines began to hum. Low at first, then building. A vibration traveled through the floor and into the seat frames. Inside her suite, Victoria sat rigid, staring at her reflection in the black screen before her. Across the aisle, the Admiral turned a page. The plane began to move. The engines roared, a deep mechanical growl that pressed everyone back into their seats. The aircraft surged forward, faster, louder, until the ground gave way, and New York dissolved beneath a veil of cloud. Victoria kept her suite door closed during takeoff. Her fingers dug into the armrest as the plane climbed, not from fear of flying, from something far less familiar. Across the aisle, Admiral Sterling sat upright, calm as the horizon leveled out beyond his window. When the seatbelt sign dimmed, he reopened his book. The small overhead reading light formed a quiet halo over charcoal fabric and steady hands. Cabin service resumed with cautious efficiency. Glasses clinked. Ice shifted in crystal tumblers. The scent of warmed bread drifted from the galley. Soft jazz returned, tentative at first. Victoria slid her door open. She needed to reclaim space. Sarah approached with a silver tray. "Champagne, Miss St. James?" Victoria took the flute without looking at her. The bubbles rose in frantic streams, popping against the rim like applause for a performance that had gone wrong. "Make it a double pour," she said. "Of course." Across the aisle, Eleanor bent slightly toward the Admiral. "Sir, we apologize for the disturbance." "There is nothing to apologize for," Sterling replied. His voice carried, low but clear. Victoria sipped too quickly. The alcohol burned hot down her throat. The humiliation still clung, stubborn and invasive. Passengers in the surrounding suites were no longer pretending not to notice. Phones appeared discreetly above tray tables. A few screens glowed with open messaging apps. Fingers moved quickly. Victoria told herself they were emailing assistants, not documenting her. She leaned across the aisle. "You're enjoying this," she said quietly. Sterling did not look up from his page. "Enjoying what?" "The spectacle." "There is no spectacle," he answered. "Only consequences." The word irritated her more than the earlier salute. "You humiliated me." I remained seated. She clenched her jaw. "You could have identified yourself immediately. I did not owe you that." Silence settled between them. Thick, uncomfortable. Victoria straightened. "Well," she said, louder now, "I suppose we will see how much influence you truly have when this lands on my attorney's desk." That made him look up, not angrily, not defensively, curiously. "Is litigation your preferred remedy for embarrassment?" "My preferred remedy is accountability." "For whom?" he asked. The question hung unanswered. Dinner service arrived in stages. Porcelain plates, linen napkins, silver cutlery placed with ritual precision. The cabin lighting softened to a muted amber, imitating sunset over the Atlantic. Victoria barely touched her food. Instead, she opened her laptop. The familiar chime of startup echoed faintly. The glow illuminated her face in cold blue light. Her inbox flooded with routine updates, meeting reminders, social invitations, quarterly projections. Normalcy. She began drafting an email. Subject line: Formal complaint flight 402. Her fingers moved fast, precise, framing the narrative in her favor. She described feeling threatened. She described unprofessional crew behavior. She described reputational damage. She avoided certain words. She did not type hoodie. She did not type black. Across the aisle, Sterling closed his paperback and replaced it carefully inside his bag. From the same bag, he removed a rugged, military-grade laptop. The casing was matte, scarred slightly from use, corners reinforced. He opened it. The faint hum of internal cooling fans blended with the cabin's ambient noise. Victoria noticed. "You travel with that?" she asked. "Yes. It looks industrial. It serves its purpose." She leaned back. "I imagine you review important matters on it." "Sometimes," he began typing. The rhythm was slow, deliberate, not frantic, not reactive. Victoria's email grew sharper. She added the names of the officers, the captain, the airline CEO. She attached nothing. Her champagne glass emptied. Sarah refilled it without comment. Mid-cabin, a passenger laughed quietly at something on a phone screen. Another whispered, "It's already everywhere." Victoria ignored them. Sterling paused his typing and looked across the aisle. Mrs. Street James. The use of her married title landed heavier than expected. "Yes, I met your husband once." The words cut through her rising irritation. "You did?" "In Kabul, 2010. Barracks construction. He inspected the foundation personally." Victoria blinked. "That sounds like Richard." He insisted on reviewing the concrete mix ratios. She felt a brief flicker of pride. He believed in quality. Sterling's gaze did not soften. He believed in responsibility. The distinction settled between them. "He built something enduring," Sterling continued. "That is not always the case now." Her shoulders stiffened. "What is that supposed to mean?" He turned his laptop slightly. Not enough for her to read the screen, but enough to suggest there was something on it. "Contracts evolve," he said. "Oversight does as well." A faint reflection of text flickered in the black border of her own screen. Columns, numbers, a header line. She could not make it out clearly. "You are not implying." "I am stating," he interrupted gently, "that leadership is visible, even at 30,000 feet. The cabin lights dimmed further. Outside the windows, the sky had shifted to deep indigo. A thin crescent moon hovered over cloud cover like a blade. Victoria closed her laptop with a sharper snap than intended. "You may have impressed a pilot and a few officers," she said, voice low. "But business decisions are not made on airplanes." Sterling met her gaze steadily. "No," he agreed. "They are not." He resumed typing. The quiet confidence in his tone unsettled her more than the earlier confrontation. In the subdued glow of first class, surrounded by leather, crystal, and curated silence, Victoria felt something she had not felt in years. Uncertainty, and it did not feel temporary. The cabin lights shifted to a deeper blue as the aircraft settled into cruise. Dinner trays had been cleared, glassware removed. The hum of the engines became a steady, almost hypnotic undercurrent. Most of first class reclined into private cocoons of sleep. Victoria did not. The alcohol had dulled the sharp edge of humiliation, but replaced it with something more volatile: resentment. It simmered beneath her skin like a fever. Across the aisle, Admiral Sterling's reading light cast a narrow circle over his tray table. His rugged laptop remained open. Lines of text reflected faintly in his glasses. Columns, headings, bullet points. His fingers moved in deliberate intervals, as if each keystroke carried weight. Victoria slid her suite door open. The soft mechanical glide sounded louder than it should have in the dim cabin. "You seem very busy," she said. Sterling did not look up immediately. "I am," he replied. With what? Drafting another report about me? He closed the laptop halfway, not fully, a gesture that acknowledged her without surrendering his focus. I do not write reports about passengers, he said calmly. Then what is so urgent that it cannot wait until morning? He studied her face for a moment. Tomorrow morning I have a meeting at the United States Embassy in London. She crossed her arms. And that concerns me. How? It concerns you directly. The words felt precise, measured. She laughed softly. Unless you intend to file a complaint about my tone, I fail to see the relevance. He turned the laptop slightly toward himself and tapped a key. The screen brightened momentarily. She caught a clearer glimpse now. A header line, Oversight Review Infrastructure Contract Renewal, July. Her breath stalled. That contract, he continued evenly, accounts for roughly 80% of Street James Holdings' annual revenue. Her fingers tightened against her sleeves. You've done your research, she said, attempting composure. It is not research, he replied. It is my responsibility. The engines droned steadily, indifferent to the shift in gravity between them. You are not suggesting, she said slowly, that a government renewal depends on a disagreement in a cabin. No. He held her gaze. It depends on leadership. Silence expanded between them. She searched his expression for pettiness, vindictiveness, personal revenge. She found none. I chair the oversight board reviewing that renewal, he added. The cabin seemed to tilt. You are the chairman? She whispered. Yes. Her throat tightened. They were going to renew it, she said quickly. We have legacy status. They were considering it, he corrected. Despite declining inspection reports. Declining? She snapped. We post record profits. Profit and integrity are not synonyms. The words landed heavier than any insult. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. If this is about optics, we can discuss improvements. Investment adjustments. Reallocation. Sterling studied her carefully. In the last 6 months, he said quietly, inspection teams documented mold in housing units in Germany, electrical failures in Okinawa, plumbing overruns 40% above budget. Each item struck like a stone dropped into still water. That is internal data, she said sharply. You have no authority to? I have full authority, he replied. He tapped the laptop lightly. The sound was soft. Final. A faint reflection of a digital timestamp flashed across the edge of his screen. July. Dated. Logged. You are leveraging a personal slight, she accused. I am leveraging documented deficiencies. Her breathing grew shallow. My husband built those foundations, she said, as if invoking him might stabilize the moment. Yes, Sterling replied. He did. The acknowledgement was respectful and devastating. He understood that soldiers live in what we build, Sterling continued, that their families do. That concrete thickness is not cosmetic. Her jaw tightened. You think I do not understand responsibility? I think, he said carefully, that I have observed how you treat people when you believe you hold power. The cabin felt colder now, despite the controlled temperature. I will not allow one emotional encounter to dictate the fate of my company, she said. It is not one encounter, he replied. It is a pattern. Outside the window, the Atlantic stretched black and endless. Victoria felt the first genuine tremor of fear. If the contract is denied, she asked quietly, what happens? The bid goes to a competitor. And Street James Holdings? It adjusts. Or it collapses. The word collapse hovered between them like an approaching storm. You cannot be serious, she said. I am always serious about infrastructure that houses service members. She stared at the laptop. Have you made your decision? He held her gaze a moment longer. I was undecided when I boarded. Her pulse pounded in her ears. And now? He reached for his noise-canceling headphones and placed them over his ears. The motion was unhurried, controlled. The meeting is tomorrow, he said softly. But leadership reveals itself before boardrooms. He tapped a final key. The faint chime of a sent message blended almost invisibly into the cabin's ambient hum. Victoria's stomach dropped. You sent something, she said. I did. To whom? The Oversight Committee. Her voice faltered. From the plane? Yes. The engines continued their steady roar. Victoria stared at the closed line of his jaw, at the composed stillness that had infuriated her hours earlier. The glow from his laptop screen dimmed as it went idle. She suddenly understood that the confrontation in first class had never been the main event. It had been evidence, and it had just been submitted. For a long moment after the soft chime of his sent message, Victoria simply stood there. The engines hummed. The cabin lighting remained low and artificial, suspended somewhere between night and morning. Around them, first class lay in curated stillness, duvets pulled up, suite doors closed, the illusion of privacy intact. Across the aisle, Admiral Sterling had already withdrawn. Headphones on, eyes forward, unreachable. Victoria stepped back into her suite and slid the door shut with more force than necessary. The click sounded small, almost fragile. She sat. Her reflection stared back at her from the darkened entertainment screen. Dior glasses now pushed up into her hair. Mascara slightly smudged at the edges. Jaw tight. This was not over. She reached for her phone. No signal yet. The small airplane icon still glowed stubbornly in the corner. She toggled Wi-Fi on. Purchased the full flight package without hesitation. $30 charged in a single tap. The connection icon spun, then connected. Her phone vibrated. Once, twice, then, continuously. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The device trembled against the polished wood of the tray table like something alive and panicked. Victoria frowned and lifted it. Notifications flooded her lock screen in stacked, relentless rows. Mentions, tags, direct messages. She unlocked it. The first alert was from her public relations director. Call me immediately. Below it, a link. She tapped it. A video filled the screen. Her own face stared back at her, flushed, animated, finger extended in accusation. The camera angle was clean, steady, professional. He is aggressive. He is in the wrong seat. Remove him. Her voice sounded shriller than she remembered. The words harsher, emptier. The video cut to the captain standing at attention. Admiral, welcome aboard, sir. The frame froze for half a second on her expression, shock widening her eyes. Bold white text overlaid the image. Billionaire executive demands decorated admiral removed from first class. Victoria's breath shortened. The view count ticked upward in real time. 3.8 million, 3.9, 4 million. The comments scrolled faster than she could read. Boycott Street James. Imagine profiting off military housing and treating a veteran like that. Stock crashing already. Her thumb trembled. She opened a financial app. Street James Holdings. Ticker symbol flashing red. Down 18% in after-hours trading. A graph sloped sharply downward like a cliff face. Her phone buzzed again. An email from her chief financial officer. Subject: Urgent market reaction. Victoria. The video is viral. Asian markets opened 30 minutes ago. We are down nearly 20%. The board is convening an emergency call. This is escalating. She swallowed hard. Across the aisle, Sterling remained motionless. The faint reflection of his laptop screen glowed against the window, but he was not looking at it now. He was staring outward, into the dark Atlantic. Victoria typed quickly. Draft response. Immediate statement. Misunderstanding. Safety concerns. Emotional distress. Her fingers stumbled over the keys. Another notification. Trending #1 in the United States. Hashtag Stain James scandal. Her name sat beneath it. She opened social media again. Clips were already edited, captioned, slowed for emphasis. Her words looped. Look at him. Does he look like he paid $12,000? The internet had isolated the line and replayed it endlessly. Her chest tightened. She stood abruptly, needing air, needing movement. The cabin lights flickered softly as the seatbelt sign chimed on. A calm announcement flowed from the cockpit. Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our initial descent into London Heathrow. Victoria ignored it. She stepped into the aisle. Eleanor appeared almost immediately from the galley, posture rigid. Miss Street James, she said evenly, please return to your seat. I need to make a call, Victoria insisted, voice shaking. My company is under attack. The seatbelt sign is on, Eleanor replied. You must remain seated. Victoria glanced toward Sterling. You did this, she hissed. He turned his head slightly. I did not post the video, he said calmly. You could stop it. I have no social media presence, he answered, and I do not manage public opinion. Her composure fractured. You sent that message, she accused. You set this in motion. I submitted a report, he corrected. The public reacted to what they saw. Her phone buzzed again. Another alert. St. James Holdings down 22%. Board considering suspension pending review. The word suspension seemed unreal. She sank back into her seat. The leather felt colder now. Across the cabin, a passenger in 2A caught her eye and lifted his phone slightly, showing the trending page without a word. Her own image dominated it. Victoria's throat burned. This is temporary, she muttered to herself. Markets overreact. Sterling watched her quietly. Markets respond to risk, he said. She looked up at him. Desperation replacing anger. You cannot allow a viral clip to influence federal contracting decisions. It will not, he replied. But leadership conduct already has. The aircraft tilted gently as it descended through cloud cover. Outside the window, the sky lightened faintly at the horizon. Victoria stared down at her screen. Another email from the board chairman. Emergency vote in progress. She felt the ground slipping long before the wheels ever touched it. The engines reduced power. The cabin pressure shifted subtly in her ears. Her phone vibrated again, breaking. U.S. Department of Defense delays infrastructure renewal pending review. Delay. Not yet denial, but close enough. Victoria closed her eyes. Across the aisle, Sterling removed his headphones. The cabin lights brightened incrementally for landing. For him, it was just another arrival. For Victoria, it felt like impact. The wheels struck the runway with a hard, jarring thud. Rubber screamed briefly against asphalt. Reverse thrusters roared. A violent rush of sound that filled the cabin and pressed everyone forward in their seats. The aircraft decelerated with controlled force, metal and momentum negotiating gravity. Victoria barely felt it. Her eyes were fixed on her phone. The screen refreshed. Down 26%. Another refresh. Down 29%. Her reflection flickered in the black glass. Between updates pale now. Jaw slack. The sharp certainty she had worn for years, dissolving under fluorescent cabin light. Cabin crew, prepare doors for arrival, came the captain's steady voice overhead. A ripple of movement passed through first class. Seat backs lifted, belts unlatched with a synchronized series of clicks. Suite doors slid open one by one, like curtains rising. Victoria did not move. Her phone vibrated again. Subject: Board resolution. Her thumb hovered before tapping it open. Miss Street James, pursuant to Section 9, Morals and Conduct Clause, and in light of material, reputational, and financial damage incurred within the last 4 hours, the board has voted unanimously to suspend you as Chief Executive Officer, effective immediately, pending formal investigation. She stopped breathing. A line below it pulsed like a wound. Market capitalization loss, 30% during flight duration, 30%. In 4 hours, her fingers trembled so violently she nearly dropped the device. Across the aisle, Admiral Sterling stood calmly and retrieved his backpack from the overhead bin. The fabric of his hoodie caught the early London light filtering through the window. Soft, gray, unremarkable, steady. He glanced at her once. Not triumph, not cruelty. Assessment. You act quickly, she managed to say, her voice thin. I act when necessary, he replied. The aircraft door opened with a hollow mechanical sigh. Cold London air crept into the cabin, cutting through the recycled warmth. Passengers began filing out, some casting lingering looks at Victoria, some not bothering to hide their stares. A man in 2A paused beside her seat. Tough day, he murmured, not unkindly, before stepping into the aisle. She did not respond. Her phone buzzed again. Breaking. Department of Defense formally denies renewal of Street James Holdings infrastructure contract. Denied. Not delayed. Denied. The word seemed to expand until it filled her vision. She looked up slowly at Sterling. You sent that before we landed, she said. I sent a report, he answered evenly. The committee reviewed it. From the air, she whispered. He adjusted the strap of his bag. Accountability does not require a runway. The cabin had nearly emptied now. Only crew remained at their stations, eyes deliberately neutral. Victoria stood unsteadily. Her legs felt unreliable beneath her. She stepped into the aisle. The jet bridge stretched ahead like a narrow corridor towards something inevitable. Outside the aircraft door, beyond the glass, she saw flashing lights. Cameras. Reporters. They were not subtle. Lenses aimed directly at the aircraft entrance. Her stomach dropped. How? She began. Information travels faster than aircraft, Sterling said quietly. He stepped forward first. Captain Reynolds waited just beyond the threshold. They exchanged a brief handshake, professional, contained. Cars ready on the tarmac, the captain said. Thank you, Sterling replied. He moved past Victoria without brushing her shoulder. Good luck with the board meeting, he added, almost gently. Then he descended the stairs to the waiting black SUV below, disappearing from view. Victoria stepped forward into the jet bridge. The moment she crossed into the terminal corridor, the noise hit her. Miss Street James, do you regret your comments? Are you resigning? Flashbulbs exploded in white bursts, blinding and relentless. Microphones extended toward her like weapons. She raised her hand instinctively to shield her face. No comment, she muttered. At the end of the corridor stood 2 Metropolitan Police officers. Beside them, a man in a gray suit. Henderson, head of the UK division. Relief flickered through her chest. Henderson, she said, rushing toward him. Get me out of here. He did not step forward. He held a thick envelope instead. Miss Street James, he said, voice strained but controlled. The paper felt heavier than it should have when she took it, her name printed in formal type across the front. Inside, the suspension notice repeated what she had just read electronically. Official letterhead. Legal language. Effective immediately. She looked up. "I am majority shareholder," she said weakly. "Not controlling anymore," Henderson replied. "The investors have exercised protective provisions." Behind her, cameras continued clicking. "And the contract?" she asked, though she already knew. "Formally awarded to Vanguard Infrastructure," he said. 10 minutes ago. 10 minutes. The time it took to taxi, to open a door, to walk a jet bridge. One of the Metropolitan officers stepped forward. "Miss Victoria Street James," he said clearly over the press noise. "We need to speak with you regarding a complaint filed about your conduct in UK airspace." She stared at him. "For what?" "Racially aggravated harassment under the Public Order Act," he answered. The corridor felt suddenly very narrow. "I didn't touch anyone," she said. "You will have an opportunity to provide a statement," the officer replied. Flashbulbs erupted again as they guided her forward. Victoria glanced back once through the glass wall overlooking the tarmac. The black SUV carrying Admiral Sterling was already gone. The runway lights flickered in the grey London morning. For the first time since boarding the aircraft, Victoria understood something with painful clarity. The fall had not begun at cruising altitude. It had simply been recorded there. The interview room at Heathrow was smaller than Victoria expected. No marble, no glass, no polished chrome, reflecting her importance back at her. Just grey walls, a metal table bolted to the floor, 2 plastic chairs, and a faint smell of disinfectant that clung to the air like an afterthought. Her phone had been taken at the desk. Her handbag sat in a clear evidence tray outside the room, tagged and labeled. The sight of it behind plexiglass felt obscene. She sat stiffly, hands folded too tightly in her lap. Across from her, a female officer clicked a pen and opened a thin file. "Miss Street James," she began evenly, "we're here to take your statement regarding alleged racially aggravated harassment during a commercial flight entering UK airspace." Victoria straightened. "I was concerned for my safety," she said. The words felt rehearsed already. "I raised a security issue. That is not harassment." The officer did not react. "Several witnesses provided video evidence," she replied calmly. "We have reviewed portions of it." "Video evidence." Victoria swallowed. "It was taken out of context," she insisted. The officer slid a tablet across the table. On the screen, frozen mid-frame, was Victoria's face, finger extended, lips parted in accusation. The officer tapped play. "Look at him. Does he look like he paid $12,000? The line echoed in the sterile room. Stripped of cabin ambiance, stripped of champagne, stripped of entitlement. It sounded smaller here. Petty. Naked. Victoria's jaw tightened. "That is not what I meant," she said quickly. "What did you mean?" the officer asked. She opened her mouth, closed it. "I meant that the seat assignment seemed irregular." The officer paused the video. "You also referred to him as a hoodlum." Silence. "I was emotional," Victoria said. The officer leaned back slightly. "Emotion does not negate impact." The words landed with clinical precision. Outside the room, a door opened and closed. Distant footsteps passed. The world was moving forward without her. Inside, time felt pinned. The officer closed the file. "Given that the alleged victim is not pursuing personal charges at this time," she said, "this will likely proceed as a public order matter. You will be released pending further review." Relief flared briefly. "However," the officer continued, "you should be aware that the Crown Prosecution Service will evaluate whether the video and witness statements meet the threshold for formal charge." Victoria nodded stiffly. She had lawyers. She had resources. This was manageable. It had to be. An hour later, she was escorted through a side exit to avoid the main press cluster. The morning sky over London was pale and overcast. the light flat and unforgiving. A hired car waited at the curb, not her usual driver, not a company vehicle, a rented sedan with no logo. She slid into the back seat. As the car pulled away, she reached instinctively for her phone. It was returned to her at the exit desk. She turned it on. The battery icon blinked low but alive. Notifications resumed instantly, down 40%. Street James Holdings continued its slide. As European markets opened, another alert. Board appoints interim CEO. Her name was no longer attached to the title. She stared at the screen as if the letters might rearrange themselves. They did not. The car moved through London traffic, past brick buildings and quiet morning pedestrians who had no idea she was in the back seat, watching her empire unravel. Or perhaps they did. Another notification. Video reaches 12 million views. International coverage. Her image attached to headlines in multiple languages. She closed her eyes briefly. The driver adjusted the rearview mirror. "You all right back there?" he asked cautiously. "I'm fine," she said automatically. Her voice sounded unfamiliar. She opened her email. A message from legal counsel waited. "We will challenge the board's interpretation of the morals clause. However, optics are unfavorable. Immediate public apology recommended." Apology. The word felt foreign. Her phone buzzed again. Breaking. Vanguard Infrastructure stock surges following DoD award. Vanguard, the competitor. The replacement. The car slowed at a red light. Victoria looked out the window. A cafe on the corner bustled quietly. People carried paper cups, coats wrapped tight against the damp air. No one seemed aware of market collapses or federal contracts. The ordinariness unsettled her. Her world had tilted. The rest of the city had not noticed. Her phone vibrated once more. A short message from an unknown number. Board meeting in 2 hours. Attendance mandatory via video. She exhaled slowly. The car pulled up outside a temporary serviced apartment arranged by her legal team. Not Kensington, not Mayfair. A quiet, efficient building with no doorman. The driver opened the door. Victoria stepped out. The air was cooler than she expected. She stood on the pavement for a moment, staring up at the modest facade. The empire had not vanished in a single explosion. It was being dismantled in measured, procedural steps. She walked inside. The elevator hummed upward. In the small apartment, she placed her Birkin on a narrow kitchen counter. The room was clean, neutral, temporary. She sat at the small dining table and opened her laptop. The board meeting screen flickered to life. Faces appeared in tiled rectangles. No smiles, no pleasantries. The chairman cleared his throat. "Victoria," he said, voice formal and distant. "We need to discuss succession planning." Outside, light rain began to tap against the window. Inside, she realized she was no longer leading the discussion. She was being discussed. The boardroom grid on Victoria's laptop felt colder than the holding room. 9 faces. Some she had appointed herself. Some she had once intimidated into silence. Now they sat evenly lit in separate squares. Expressions measured, voices controlled. Rain streaked the apartment window behind her. The sound was soft but relentless. "Victoria," the chairman began again, fingers steepled beneath his chin. "This is not about optics alone. It is entirely about optics," she replied sharply. "Markets overreact. Social media amplifies outrage. This will stabilize." The chief financial officer cleared his throat. "It has not stabilized." He shared his screen. A graph replaced the grid of faces. The red line dropped like a blade. 46% decline since takeoff, he said. Margin calls have been triggered. 2 institutional investors have liquidated positions. Her pulse thudded in her ears. "That is panic trading," she insisted. Temporary volatility. It is not only the market, the legal counsel added quietly. The Department of Defense has formally documented leadership concerns in the denial memorandum. Leadership concerns? She echoed. The counsel scrolled to a highlighted paragraph. Conduct inconsistent with fiduciary stewardship and ethical oversight expectations. Victoria stared at the words. They are referencing a video, she said. A single interaction. They are referencing patterns. The chairman replied. A silence followed. Measured. Deliberate. Effective immediately. He continued. You are removed as chief executive officer. The words were spoken plainly. Without ceremony. You cannot remove a majority shareholder, she said, though her voice lacked its former certainty. We can remove an executive under Section 9. Legal counsel replied. The morals clause you strengthened 3 years ago. Her stomach tightened. That clause was meant for misconduct within the company. It applies to conduct materially damaging to corporate value. The counsel said. The chief financial officer spoke again. We estimate a $1.3 billion loss in market capitalization within 6 hours. The number hung heavy in the small apartment. 1.3 billion. She repeated softly. Yes. And the contract? Transferred. The chairman answered. The Oversight Committee voted unanimously. Unanimously. Her fingers trembled against the keyboard. You are making a catastrophic mistake, she said. Removing me now signals instability. Keeping you signals liability. The chairman replied. Outside, a bus passed below, water spraying from its tires across wet pavement, ordinary life continuing. Is there nothing I can do? She asked, the question barely audible. A pause. Public apology. The communications director offered. Immediate. Unequivocal. Victoria looked down at her own reflection in the darkened edge of the screen. An apology would not restore the contract. It would not reverse the stock price. It would not erase 12 million views. It would be perceived as strategic, not sincere. She said, perception is already unfavorable. The chairman responded. Her phone vibrated on the table. She ignored it. We are convening an interim executive committee, he continued. Transition begins today. Faces began to blink out of the grid as participants signed off, one by one, until only her own square remained. She stared at it, disconnected. The screen went black. The apartment felt unnaturally quiet. Her phone vibrated again. This time she picked it up, breaking. Street James Holdings Board removes Victoria Street James as CEO. The headline loaded instantly. Her photograph accompanied it, not the polished gala portrait she preferred. The cabin still image, finger extended, eyes blazing. She set the phone down slowly. Her legal counsel called moments later. We will pursue wrongful termination, he said, without preamble. But the optics are difficult. I am aware of the optics, she replied flatly. We can challenge the denial of the contract, but the oversight report is thorough. The word thorough struck. He prepared it before boarding, she murmured. Prepared what? Nothing. Silence lingered on the line. Victoria, her counsel said carefully, this will be protracted. Expensive. How expensive? Litigation at this level could exceed 8 figures. She closed her eyes. I will authorize it. After the call ended, she remained seated at the small dining table. The rain intensified, tapping harder against the glass. She opened her financial dashboard again. 49%. Half. Nearly half her market value erased in less than a day. A new alert appeared. Credit facility under review. She stared at it. That had never happened before. She stood and walked to the window. The street below glistened under gray skies. Pedestrians moved with umbrellas tilted against the drizzle. No one looked up. Her empire had not exploded. It was being dismantled in spreadsheets, in clauses, in votes. Her phone buzzed one final time, a message from the board chairman. For what it is worth, this did not need to unfold this way. She stared at the sentence, then set the phone face down. Across the Atlantic, Admiral Sterling would be arriving at the embassy. She imagined him walking through polished corridors, briefing folders in hand, measured and composed. The contrast stung. She had believed power was volume. He had demonstrated it was leverage. Rainwater traced uneven paths down the window pane, distorting the city beyond. Victoria rested her palm against the cool glass. For the first time, she understood that the dismantling was not reactive. It was procedural, documented, voted, executed, and she had supplied the final exhibit herself. 6 months later, the rain still fell over London with quiet persistence. Victoria sat at a narrow kitchen table in a rented flat that smelled faintly of detergent and unfamiliar walls. The luxury pieces were gone. No marble counters, no curated art, just pale paint, basic fixtures, and a kettle that clicked loudly when it finished boiling. Her laptop rested open in front of her, not to monitor stock prices anymore. There were none to monitor. Street James Holdings had been restructured under new leadership. Her lawsuit had stalled, then thinned, then quietly dissolved under mounting legal costs and unfavorable rulings. The wrongful termination claim had not survived discovery. The footage had been admissible. The board's vote had been airtight. She had underestimated procedure. On her screen now was a live stream, a dedication ceremony. The camera panned across a newly constructed housing complex in Germany. Clean lines, reinforced foundations, fresh paint bright against a crisp autumn sky. Children ran across a playground that had not been cut from the budget. Swings arced forward and back. A small boy in a red jacket chased a soccer ball across new turf. Victoria's fingers tightened slightly on the edge of the table. A podium stood at the center of the courtyard. Admiral David Sterling stepped forward in a navy suit. No hoodie today, no medals either, just a simple lapel pin and steady posture. He looked older than he had on the plane. Tired, perhaps, but composed. "We are here today," he began, voice amplified gently through outdoor speakers, "to restore a promise." The wind moved lightly through the microphones, carrying faint static, a promise that those who serve deserve housing built with integrity. The camera shifted. Beside him stood a young woman in her early 30s, dark hair pulled back, professional, focused. Maya Sterling. Victoria recognized the name before the face. Years earlier, an internship application had crossed her desk. MIT architecture program. Honors. Recommendations attached. She had skimmed it, paused at the last name, dismissed it. Charity cases complicate optics, she had said at the time. Now Maya stepped to the podium. "We reviewed every prior deficiency," she said clearly. "We reinforced every structural weakness. We rebuilt what should never have been compromised." Applause rose from the gathered families. Victoria felt something unfamiliar press against her ribs. Not anger, not resentment, something heavier. The live stream camera zoomed briefly on the engraved plaque near the entrance. Built with oversight and accountability. The words were simple, unadorned. Sterling stood slightly behind his daughter now, watching her address the crowd, not dominating, supporting. Victoria muted the volume for a moment. The silence in the apartment felt dense. Her phone lay face down beside the laptop. It had not vibrated in days. The media cycle had moved on. New scandals, new outrage. Her name surfaced only occasionally now, usually in case studies about reputational collapse. She reached for the kettle and poured hot water into a chipped ceramic mug. No imported espresso machine, no curated beans, just plain tea. She carried it back to the table and sat down again. On screen, a ribbon was stretched across the entrance of the complex. Maya and her father each held one end of the ceremonial scissors. They cut it together. The sound of applause echoed faintly through laptop speakers. Victoria turned the volume back on. Because character, Maya was saying, is what endures when the concrete is tested. Character. The word settled heavily in the small room. Victoria closed her eyes briefly. 6 months ago, she would have scoffed at the sentiment, considered it branding language. Now it sounded like indictment. The live stream ended. The screen shifted to suggested videos. Victoria stared at her reflection in the dark glass. She had not rebuilt anything. She had not launched a redemption tour, had not authored a memoir, had not reclaimed public favor. She had simply retreated. The rain tapped steadily against the window. Outside, pedestrians passed without recognition. She was no longer followed by cameras, no longer shielded by drivers. She lifted her mug and took a careful sip. It was too hot. She winced slightly, set it down, and walked to the window. The city stretched gray and indifferent beneath low clouds. For the first time in her adult life, no one expected anything from her. No board votes, no quarterly calls, no press statements, just quiet. Across the Atlantic, in a courtyard filled with military families, a playground she had once removed from a budget was now filled with children's laughter. Victoria rested her palm lightly against the cool window pane. She had mistaken authority for permanence. She had mistaken wealth for insulation. She had mistaken dignity for something optional. Rain traced uneven paths down the glass, distorting the streetlights below. Inside the flat, the kettle clicked off again. Outside, the world continued without her, at the center of it. Character, she realized too late, was not a line item. It was the foundation, and foundations, once cracked, do not quietly repair themselves.